I am so excited to welcome you guys. Thank you so much for coming. With the India Center, as well as my work with GBL, I think we've tried to shine a light on issues that are important for India, that deserve more academic attention. You all have kind of, in this work that you'll showcase today, made inroads into this space of kind of making work for women.
We saw some amazing numbers in this one about like how much female labor force participation in India has increased. So it's just like ideating like, okay, what could be the drivers? Like we saw some trends about how it's mostly the women in the rural areas, women who are in the particular occupational status that said like self-employed are the ones who are like really driving this trend upwards. There is not a lot of like growth in female labor force participation in the urban areas. So the focus of most of the analysis today will be actually in the rural area, where 47.6% of women in India, like 15 and above, are apparently in the labor market right now. More than half of all the women in the labor force in this round are actually, as you can see, are in self-employed sector in the rural farm sectors, like self-employed farm sector. So it's mostly like agriculture, own agricultural things. There is such a high concentration of women in the agricultural sector, and there's like such a attachment to the agricultural sector because there is like lack of outside employment opportunities.
Yes, there are women who are deeply disconnected from the labor market, but then there is a large proportion of women who want to work but do not look for jobs. And when they do, they look for jobs less intensely than men. They report not knowing where to look. They are also more likely to report to have not found their preferred jobs. And a very well-explored consequence of these social norms and safety concerns is that women travel less frequently than men, and they travel differently than how men would. According to DHS, about 44% of women reported that they cannot travel alone outside their villages or their neighborhoods. And there are similar trends in different sets of data. So there was another, which is about 43% report that they cannot travel short distances on buses and trains. A natural solution is to travel with other job-seeking women. Matching and coordinated travel increased women's participation in interviews about 76 to 80%. So one more thing that we found was most of the trips that women made outside of the interview experiment were with women from their neighborhoods to these employers.
In particular, a lot of firms nowadays, like thinking about like large multinationals, they have conditions that you actually want to achieve gender parity at hiring, and so if in terms of like an equal man and an equal woman at on CVs, they actually maybe prefer to hire the woman. But they don't consider the fact that on observables, women and men might look very differently. Female labor force participation and economic development are not a perfect correlation. And in particular, you can observe countries with high level of GDP per capita, but still low labor force participation. Gender equality policy may actually backfire because policies that would actually require equal promotion rates of women and men might actually not be equal in practice because the workforce composition, the average woman and the average man in the firm are actually different to start with.
So what I have here are two very similar jobs. They're entry-level customer support jobs. The one on the left is in Philadelphia, and the one on the right is in Bangalore. Now you can see the job on the left in this red box, it has a bunch of amenities. The job on the right, now remember this is like the same type of job in Bangalore, it doesn't have those listed. And so is it that this company doesn't have those amenities? Is it that for job seekers in this context, it doesn't make an impact to put those amenities on the job description?
So typically when we think about discrimination in the literature, if you're an employer who's looking to hire for a job on the night shift, you might engage in what we think of as two forms of discrimination. The first would be taste-based discrimination, where the employer just likes one group less than another. And the other form that we typically recognize is statistical discrimination, where the employer uses some easily observable characteristic to try to infer the productivity or profitability of one group over another. So if the employer believes one group is more productive than another, they might discriminate against the less productive group. We're going to be looking at a different form of discrimination that we call paternalistic discrimination, where the idea is that an employer expects to internalize some amount of welfare from hiring one group relative to another. And this can be in addition to our typical forms of discrimination, so they can still get taste-based and profit-based utility out of hiring this candidate. But at the same time, they might think something like, I like the candidate, I want to work with the candidate, and I think this candidate is highly qualified, but working at night is too dangerous for women, for example.
There's a mismatch between the types of jobs that are available and the types of jobs that women can or want to do, given current norms of appropriate behavior for women. So given this mismatch between jobs and norms, that kind of presents two potential strategies. We could either work on changing the jobs so that even holding norms constant, women could take some kind of paid work at a lower cost, or we could work on changing norms so that women could take jobs as they currently exist while incurring lower social and self-image costs.
So in order to address all of these different constraints that women could experience for jobs outside the home, we established these home-based jobs as well as these female-friendly local offices that essentially are within a 5-minute walking distance from home. They permit children as well, so there's a female supervisor available to take care, and the job itself is only about 2 hours a day at a time of a woman's choice. Now, another strategy to actually get women to enter could be to maybe just increase wages. That maybe there's such high fixed costs of women entering the work that if you just pay them enough, then maybe women could actually enter.
So broadly speaking, like I said, on the take-up margin, women who get assigned to work from home are 17% more likely to take up the job offer. In a day or a week of production, if you average all that out, the work from home is making 80+% more.
So we know that there's a substantial gap between demonstrated participation in labor force, depending on which year PLFS decides to double the estimates. And then there's also, we find, very high stated aspiration for work. So in our survey, 91% of the women say that they aspire to work. And in contrast, there's 70% of employed women actually in the informal sector. So, and there's a bunch of work in informality and employment risk that shows that employment risk induces risk aversion in other realms, like precautionary savings, and it also increases demand for programmatic and non-programmatic welfare. So there's spillovers of risk into other realms of people's lives.
So we're interested in how important it is to incentivize HR staff to provide high quality and prompt responses to the grievances that are submitted to this worker voice tool. In the study, workers ended up using Enache for a wide range of grievances, primarily work culture and bank and salary related issues, but also things like factory equipment, factory amenities, related concerns, canteen food complaints, and then even a few cases of sexual harassment complaints. We find that this worker voice tool reduced quitting and absenteeism and increased salary after around 6 months of null or even opposite signed effects.
In India, for example, the average woman only earns 65% as much as the average man, and in Brazil, only 72%. Now, these gender wage gaps could emerge because women are less productive than men, or perhaps employers engage in taste-based discrimination. But they could also rise because the labor market is less competitive for women than it is for men. Women may prefer their specific employer more than men. And women may have fewer good employers than men, for example, because only a few employers provide the types of amenities that are valued by women. Things like maternity leave, flexibility, childcare, and so on. Or it could be that women are only good at doing certain jobs. So they are very good tailors, but very bad construction workers, whereas men are both very good tailors and very good construction workers.
The workers who are in this wages in textile sector are essentially earning around $130, $35 a month. So they are liquidity constraints, and that financial stress then probably transmits to all aspects of their life, also to their work, right? You can essentially withdraw any salary at the end of the month. But here what we are trying to do is to provide essentially employer-linked services where workers can go and withdraw salary at any point during the month, right?
Do I want to face the question of, do I want to be able to take a sick kid to a doctor's appointment, or do I want to work in a place with health and safety protections? That's not a decision that anyone should have to make.
There is no research and data on the actual health needs of the drivers we're talking about. There's a lot of ancillary research on like taxi drivers and truck drivers, but there's no real information about what the healthcare needs are for Uber and Lyft drivers.
I wonder what the effects would be, how the effects would be different for some of these interventions if there was an employee ownership component? What might we see different?
It's essential to co-design or co-create the programs with them. It's highly important to do capacity building workshops for the middle management. Mostly, they are the most ignored population in most of the organizations, right? Because they are not visible. So it's very important to engage with them in multiple ways.
Some of the biggest challenges that probably we have faced is data collection. A core of our work is data. It's very important for us to know when to collect data and how to collect data.
What are the kind of aspirations they have, what is the overall ecosystem in which they operate, and what has that meant for communication in terms of disseminating research results, is that number one, messaging really matters. So how are we able to contextualize the evidence we produce in real world settings that matter to businesses?
I was managing like 400 to 500 workers when I was hardly 21, 22. A lot of power trip. 40 degrees plus temperature. I was irritated like anything. And the site to my office, this distance was like 1.5 to 2 kilometers. I was dehydrated, irritated, frustrated. It was a very overwhelming experience for me. You all have been on the field for a really long time. You must have experienced something different, right? It has stayed with you. Some of you are at a senior level. You must be interacting with the funders or CEOs of the factories or sometimes politicians also, right? So I want you to think about those experiences. Share something that has remained with you and you felt that it had a potential to become a research question. Wear your storyteller's hats, be creative in narrating your stories.
And the way she felt that, yeah, exactly. Yeah. But then I was really taken aback by the way she was like, oh, you're actually.
But there was also some power, like hope for the future.
A lot of times, I'm betting one to have experience yourself, not always, but is there a way, especially in centers, there has to be something.
Thank you so much. It was a wonderful day.